Hi, I'm Larry Withers and welcome to this video, Measuring Methods for Artists. If you've ever wondered what artists were doing when they peer over the top of their pencil, well, let me tell you, they're measuring. When an artist wants to be exact in their drawing, they measure. Measuring goes back as far as the Renaissance. It's been a part of the core curriculum of artists since the 18th century French ateliers and American art academies. Students use measuring for cast drawings and figure drawing, and it's especially useful when drawing interiors, buildings, and still lifes. Measuring is a way of attaining greater realism in drawing and painting. Using measuring, you can arrive at correct proportions, angles, and shapes. But it's also a great method of training the eye to see more realistically. Many art students use these methods when just starting out. It helps to develop the eye and teaches critical observation. But even experienced artists measure at times to solve difficult drawing problems. To be good at measuring requires some practice, and with careful application, the results can be quite exact. Today we practice several measuring methods, including comparative, sight size, and triangulation. Each of these techniques has something to recommend it in terms of accuracy, speed, or both. You can even combine these various methods to suit your needs. In this video, I'm going to show you these various techniques of measuring and how they can improve your drawing. Those of you with limited drawing experience will be surprised with the results you get when measuring. And even if you've been drawing for a while, these techniques will further improve your skills. So, with that, let's begin this video on measuring methods for artists. When artists measure, they generally use the tools at hand, their pencil or a paintbrush. For this video, I'll be using just a few simple instruments. Let's start with the pencil. In this video, my pencil will double as a drawing tool and a measuring device. Some artists like to work with pencils of varying hardness. You may prefer using a harder pencil, which makes a lighter mark while measuring and plotting points. The letter H designates a harder pencil. Later, you can use a softer pencil for darker lines and tones. For demonstration purposes, I'll be using a darker 2B pencil so you can see the process more clearly. Your paper should be of good quality and durable to stand up to constant erasing. Look for a medium or heavyweight paper sold in sheets or pads. Speaking of erasers, I'll be using this white plastic eraser. I find this type of eraser is effective in removing pencil marks, yet it won't damage the drawing surface of the paper. I'll be working on a vertical drawing surface. I recommend an easel with a drawing board. You'll also need a roll of drafting tape. When demonstrating the sight size method, I'll also be using a string attached to a weight. Carpenters use this type of weight called a plumb bob. In addition, I'll be using a small level and a ruler, although these aren't absolutely necessary. If you're viewing this program on your computer, you can download and print out a list of all the materials and tools listed in this video. Or you can go to our website, onairvideo.com, and click on the link for downloads. Here you'll find many of the supplemental files used in our instructional videos. Regardless of the method you use, there are certain ground rules that you have to adhere to achieve accurate results. First, stay in one place. Once you decide on a position from which to view your subject, stick to it. If you move backwards or forwards, right or left, you're changing your perspective, which will likely alter your measurements. Mark the position of your feet with tape to ensure you always return to the same spot when viewing your subject. Another thing, stand up straight. Don't slouch. When you slouch, you're lowering your height, which will also change your results. Always extend and lock your arms. When measuring, you should always extend and lock your arms. Keep your arms straight. Keeping your arms straight will again ensure consistent, reliable results. Also, hold your pencil or measuring device parallel to your subject. Another way to say it, if you're facing the scene, your arm and the pencil should be at a 90-degree angle. When measuring, keep one eye closed. The fact is that humans have two eyes to help us see the world three-dimensionally. But using two eyes when measuring can be confusing. For that reason, it's important to use only one eye, your dominant eye. Each of us has a dominant eye. That's the eye that we use principally to focus on objects. And it has nothing to do with whether you're right-handed or left-handed. To determine your dominant eye, take a stiff piece of paper or board and cut a small hole in the center. Hold it up to the object at arm's length. Looking through the hole with both eyes open, focus on the object. Then slowly pull the board or paper towards yourself. Remember to concentrate, keeping your eyes focused on the object. As you pull the board towards yourself, you'll naturally bring it up to the dominant focusing eye. Place your easel next to your subject. They don't necessarily have to be physically next to each other, but your subject and your paper should be visually side by side. In other words, you want to be able to see both your drawing and the subject at the same time. They should be close enough that your eye can easily alternate from subject to paper, and so that you can transfer measurements quickly from the subject to the drawing. Be accurate. Now, that should go without saying, but let me emphasize again. Try to be as accurate as possible from the first measurement. If a measurement is wrong, every subsequent measurement will only compound that mistake. Don't try rushing through the process. The more deliberate you are, the more accurate your drawing will be. Furthermore, check and recheck your measurement. Following these few simple ground rules will help ensure that your drawing is as accurate as possible. Comparative measuring is the most conventional method of measuring used by artists. The iconic image of the artist holding up a pencil in front of his subject is associated with comparative measuring. The idea behind comparative measuring is to establish a unit of measure based upon an object in the composition. Then that unit of measure is used to compare all other objects. It's a method that's fairly quick and fairly accurate. Here's how it works. Look at your subject and decide on a unit of measure. The actual unit doesn't really matter except that it shouldn't be too large or too small. In our scene, I'm going to use the width of this apple as our base measurement. To establish the unit of measure, hold your pencil in your fist. Then raise and straighten your arm. Direct the pencil either vertically or horizontally. Closing one eye and using your dominant eye, align the top point of the pencil with one edge of the object. Then, place your thumb on the pencil and slide it down the length of the pencil until the top of your thumb aligns with the other edge of the object. This then is the unit of measure. You'll use this unit of measure to compare all other objects in the scene. For instance, if we wanted to know the height of the vase from the top of the apple, we could measure and say it's about 2 1/3 apples high. If we were to measure the knife on the plate, we would know it's a little more than 1 1/2 apples in length. If we were to measure the total width of the stack of books, we would discover it was 3 apples wide. In this same way, we can measure every object in the scene based upon the width of the apple. The next thing is to transfer these measurements to create our drawing. First, I'm going to start by drawing a couple of lines to indicate the width of the apple. Let's make it about this size. There's no specific reason to make the apple this wide. This is just how wide I wanted to make the apple. The apple in our drawing doesn't have to be the same size as the apple in our scene. I can draw the apple as big as a basketball if I'd like, just as long as all the other elements in the drawing are in proportion. So, as an extreme example, if the vase in our still life is 2 3/4 apples high, then I can make the vase in my drawing to be 2 3/4 basketballs high. In that way, they're in proportion. I'm going to be making extensive use of measuring in my drawing. For that reason, I want to be very methodical in my approach. I'm going to start by blocking in the big shapes, and then later I'll refine each object. Also, for convenience, I've drawn hash marks on my pencil so I can rough in the measurements more easily and accurately. I took the overall length of the apple in my drawing and divided it into quarters and thirds. So, if I determine an object in my still life measures 3/4 apples, then I can use the hash marks on my pencil to easily measure out 3/4 apples in my drawing. I'm standing about 5 feet away from my still life, and I've marked the floor accordingly. I'll be making all visual observations from this point. My easel is a little more than arm's length away. To begin the process of blocking in, I'm going to measure the height of the apple. It's not unusual to find an apple is about as high as it is wide. With that, I'll rough in a square shape for my apple in my drawing. Moving on, I'm going to measure the dimensions of the vase. The height of the vase looks to be about 2 1/3 apples high. I want to find the relative placement of the vase in comparison to the apple. How do we do that? Well, we look for relationships. Holding my pencil vertically like a plumb line, I happen to notice that the stem of the apple is in line with this corner of the vase. Measuring from this corner of the vase, the horizontal distance to the left corner is a little less than 1 1/4 apples wide. Then, measuring from the left corner across, I've determined the total width of the vase is a little more than 1 3/4 apples wide. I'll transfer these measurements to my drawing. To simplify my drawing, I'm going to separate the opening of the vase from the sides. For that, I'll measure down from the top. It appears that the top of the vase measures between 1/2 and 2/3 apples in depth. I'm going to mark these dimensions on my drawing. To find the total width of the plate, I'm first going to measure out from the apple to get the correct location of this side of the plate. This distance is 2/3 apples in length. Once established, I'll measure across the total width of the plate. This distance is about 2 1/4 apples across. Again, I'll transfer these measurements to my drawing. To block in the area for the books, I'll first need to measure the space between the apple and the books. Once I've determined this space, I simply use my pencil to measure the width of the books, which, as we stated earlier, is about 3 apples wide. Furthermore, the height of the books is 2 plus apples high. Again, I'll transfer this to my drawing. You can improve the accuracy of your drawing by looking for relationships. For instance, we noted this corner of the vase and the stem of the apple align vertically. This corner aligns with this side of the apple as well. And the hilt of the knife lines up with this corner. Notice how the bottom of the apple is in line with this corner of the books. Once you look, you'll find useful relationships throughout your subject. Once I've blocked in my big shapes, I can further define and refine the rest of my drawing. Knowing the height and width of an object makes sketching an ellipse, like this plate, much easier. Accurately rendering the opening of the vase is a matter of reproducing the angles along the lip. I'm going to start with this corner, which you'll remember I established earlier, by aligning my pencil with the stem of the apple. Holding my pencil up to the still life, I'll align the pencil with this corner and angle the pencil so it mimics the angle of the opening. Holding the pencil at this exact angle, I'll turn toward the drawing and align the pencil in the same manner. Then I'll draw this line. Returning to my still life, I'll angle my pencil so it aligns with this corner and follows the angle on this side. Again, turning my attention to the drawing, I'll reproduce this line by aligning my pencil with this corner. Continue in this same manner for the 2 other sides. Having created the corners of the opening, I can now draw the sides of my vase. Measuring can take you a long way to accurately rendering your subject, but the subtle curves of this vase also emphasizes the importance of artistic judgment and sensitivity. The same angling technique I used to draw the opening of the vase can also be used to define the parameters of these books. Sometimes a particular point is hard to place using comparative measuring. In those instances, I may use a method called triangulation. For instance, this far corner of the top of the book is difficult to place. I know the corner of the book will be somewhere along this top line. Furthermore, I've already established the topmost corner point of this vase. I'm going to hold my pencil at an angle so that it intersects the corner of the vase and the corner of the book. While holding my pencil at this angle, I'm going to move the pencil to the drawing and align it with the corner of the vase in my drawing. Where the pencil intersects this line is where I'll mark the top corner of the book. Using our angling technique, I can also establish the direction of the knife. Erasing the construction lines is the next step before I add tone and detail. You may never use measuring to this extent. You might only use it to correct specific problems, but it's good to have knowledge of these measuring techniques. Now that I've defined my composition in terms of contours and defined the shapes, I'll finish my drawing by adding details and tone. And that's how you create a drawing using the comparative measuring method. In the next section, I'm going to demonstrate sight size, an extremely accurate method for achieving a high level of realism. In the process of constant measuring and erasing, you may damage the surface of the drawing paper. If that's the case, you may want to transfer your drawing to a fresh piece of paper. To do this, you can do it a couple of ways. First, if you have a light box, put the original drawing underneath the new paper and trace the drawing. You can also lay in graphite on the back of the original drawing. Lay the original drawing down on a new piece of paper and then trace the drawing. The graphite on the back will be transferred to the new paper. The sight size method has had a rebirth along with the classical realist movement in art. The practice itself has been around in one form or another for at least 200 years. It's a method that works best when your subject and your drawing are the same size. Portraitists like Thomas Gainsborough and John Singer Sargent, who tended to paint life-size portraits, use sight size. It's also the preferred method of measuring when cast drawing. The method is involved and time-consuming, but when done carefully, it's very accurate. Let me briefly explain the process. First, the subject and the drawing surface are positioned side by side. The artist stands several feet away from the subject and the canvas, so both are within his view. A plumb line is suspended in front of the model. The artist draws a similar plumb line on the paper. Using this plumb line as a point of reference, the artist holds a pencil to gauge the distance from the plumb line to the contour of the subject. These measurements are then transferred to the drawing as points. The artist continues taking measurements and plotting points, outlining different shapes on the subject. Then it's a matter of connecting the plot points, more or less connecting the dots. There are slight variations on this process. I use a pencil to measure, but some people use string, a knitting needle, or a compass. Modify the process to suit your style of working. Let's examine the process in detail. Place your drawing board and the easel side by side with your subject. Bring them as close as possible. Looking at it from the side, the subject and the easel are flush. Measure the width from the edge of the object to the edge of where you anticipate your drawing will end. In this case, it's 1.5 feet. Multiply that by 3. That would be 4.5 feet. Measure that distance from the point between the easel and the subject. That's where you'll be standing when viewing your subject. Tape the floor at that point. You need to stand back at least 3 times the distance or else the setup appears distorted. Hang a weighted string from above, visually dividing the subject. This is referred to as the datum line. The datum line is the one constant from which we get all measurements. Draw a similar vertical line on the paper. Looking at your subject, determine the points that define your subject. You're going to reproduce this set of points on the drawing paper. When map makers define a location on the Earth's surface, they refer to coordinates of latitude and longitude. The same thing applies to the site size method. To define a point along the contour of your subject, first, hold your pencil level. Close one eye and align the pencil with that point. Follow that line across to the drawing paper. Memorizing that spot on the vertical line, walk up to the paper and make a mark. Walk back to your position and check to see that you place the mark accurately. If not, check the horizontal alignment again and make a new mark at the appropriate spot. Then erase the old mark. With practice, you should get this within 1 or 2 tries. Do this for all the contour points. These horizontal marks represent the contour points plotted along a vertical axis. The next step is to measure out from the datum line to each of the plot points, and then to transfer those measurements point by point to the drawing. With one eye closed, use your pencil to measure the distance from the plumb line to one of the contour points. This is similar to how we measured using the comparative measuring method. Move your pencil to your drawing, and aligning your pencil with a vertical line, memorize where the point of the measurement falls. Walk up to your drawing and make a small vertical mark. Go back and recheck your measurement. I'm going to align my level with a horizontal mark on the vertical line. Where the level intersects the mark I just made, I'm going to draw a small horizontal line. This then is my first plot point. I'm using a level to mark the center of each plot point. But you could also use a pencil to get a sense of where to place your horizontal mark. I'm going to follow the same process for the rest of the contour points. I've completed plotting points for one half of the contour of my subject. Erasing the marks on the datum line of my drawing, I'll begin plotting the points for the other half of the contour. The first step, of course, is to plot points along the vertical line. Don't forget to recheck each measurement. Remember to keep your arms straight. The next step is to measure the distance from the datum line to each plot point. Then transfer that measurement to the drawing paper. I'm going to carefully connect the points so that the contour accurately reflects the outline of the subject. Take your time and observe your subject carefully before committing your drawing to paper. When using sight size, always make your observations at a distance. Then approach the easel to draw. As tempting as it may be, don't observe and draw the subject while you're at the easel. The more deliberate you are, the more accurate your drawing. In the same way I created plot points for the contour, I can render the features inside the outline of my subject. Follow the same process to measure the features inside the outline. Determine the points that define your subject. Hold your pencil horizontally to plot points along the vertical axis. Measure the distance from the datum line to each point. Transfer those measurements to the drawing. Use the plot points to guide you toward your finished drawing. Now that I've defined my composition in terms of contours and defined the shapes, I'll finish my drawing by adding details and tone. That's essentially the process using sight size. It's not generally used for drawing proportionally. That is, it's more difficult to use sight size when your drawing is larger or smaller than your actual subject. In the next section, we'll demonstrate measuring using triangulation. We talked earlier about using triangulation to determine or verify the placement of a plot point. Well, the fact is you can use this same technique to create an entire drawing. Triangulation isn't unlike the GPS system you have in your car. GPS works by referencing the position of satellites so that you can pinpoint your position anywhere on Earth. In the same way, once you've established 2 points in your drawing, you can locate all other plot points. This process is similar to sight size in that we plot points to define the various objects of our still life. The advantages of this method are it requires no calculation, it's relatively accurate, and is fairly quick. As the name implies, triangulation is about reproducing triangles, or more specifically, the points of a triangle. Here's how it works. To the right is a triangle. These 3 points mark the corners of the triangle. On the left, we have just 2 points of that triangle. To complete our copy of the triangle, I need to find the location of the third point. There's a simple way to do this. Take your pencil or other straight object and hold it up to the original triangle so that it aligns with this point and the point you want to reproduce on your copy. Then move to the copy and draw a line that follows that exact angle, starting at this point. Return to your original triangle and do the same thing using the other point. Where these two lines intersect is where you'll place the last point. Simple enough. Using this same concept, you can recreate more complex subjects. For instance, if you wanted to reproduce this shed for a drawing, you would start by conceiving the shed as a series of points. Then reproduce just 2 of those points on your drawing. Going back and forth, refer to the original subject and triangulate points on your drawing. As you plot points, you'll build upon those points until you eventually define the parameters of the shed. Point upon point and angle intersecting angle, you'll construct your drawing. To demonstrate this method, I'll be using a ruler in addition to my pencil. Now, I'm not going to be using the ruler to actually measure, but I'm going to be using the straight edge. You could use your drawing pencil to measure angles, but a ruler or straight edge is a little faster and it's more convenient. Here I'm standing 5 feet from my subject. My easel is positioned a little more than arm's length. To reproduce our still life, we first need to establish 2 indisputable reference points. All subsequent plotting points will be based upon these 2 points. It almost doesn't matter which 2 points you choose. To place your first 2 points, face your still life and align your ruler or straight edge with any 2 points. Holding the ruler at that exact angle, turn to your drawing paper. Hold the ruler in place and draw a line. Place your first 2 points along this line. In my drawing, I chose these 2 points along the vertical corner of this bottle. I'll begin by drawing a line representing the side of the perfume bottle. The ends of the line represent the first triangulation points. The distance between these 2 points will determine the final size of our drawing. The shorter the distance, the smaller the drawing. The larger the distance, the larger the drawing. To determine the placement of the point in this corner, I'll close one eye and hold my ruler so that it aligns with this point and the point in the next corner. Then, holding my ruler at that exact angle, I'll move to the drawing and align the ruler with a corresponding point on my drawing. Then I'll draw a line. I know my next point lies somewhere along this line. To find its exact location, I'll hold my ruler up to the still life and align my ruler with this point and the point in the diagonal corner. Again, holding my ruler at this exact angle, I'll move to my drawing. Align the ruler with a corresponding point at the top of this line. Where the ruler intersects this new line is where I'll place the next point. Now I've essentially established two sides of my perfume bottle. This side of the bottle I know is vertical, so in this particular instance, I don't have to measure the angle. I simply align my level vertically from this new point and draw a line that represents this side of the perfume bottle. The next point will be somewhere along this line. To find this point, I'll simply align my ruler with this point and angle the ruler to match this edge of the perfume bottle. Holding my ruler at this exact angle, I turn to my drawing and align it with this point. And where the ruler and the line intersect is where I'll place the next plot point. To create the side of this bottle, I'll start by measuring the angles of the top and bottom edges. Then draw those in. To find this uppermost corner on this side, I'll hold my ruler up to my still life. Measure the angle, then turn my attention to the drawing and reproduce that angle. Drop a straight line down to complete the side. To create the top of the bottle, I'll start with a vertical line in this corner. To find this topmost point, I'm going to hold my ruler up to the still life, so it aligns with this bottom corner point and the point I want to find in this corner. Transfer that angle to the drawing. Where these two lines meet is the topmost point in this corner. Starting at this point, I'll draw a straight vertical line to create the next corner. Once more, I'll refer to my still life and measure the angle from this point to the new point in this corner. Then, transfer this angle to the drawing. In this same manner, I'll continue plotting points to complete the measurements for this first perfume bottle. To create this other perfume bottle, I'll start with two established plot points, here and here. Holding my straight edge up to the still life, I'm going to align my ruler with this existing point and the point I want to create in this corner. Holding my ruler at that exact position, I'm going to move to my drawing and align my ruler with a corresponding point in this corner. Then I'm going to draw a line following this straight edge. I know the new point exists somewhere along this line. To fix this point, I'm going to refer back to the actual still life. Aligning my ruler with this existing point, I'll angle the ruler so it aligns with this new point. Holding the ruler at this exact angle, I'll return to my drawing and align with this established point. Where the ruler intersects this line is where I'll place the first plot point on the second perfume bottle. From here, I'll continue to plot points to complete my drawing. Another method of measuring angles, although maybe not as exacting, is to visualize your points in terms of minutes on a clock. Working from two established points, you can place a third point by doing the following. Look at your subject and imagine a clock face superimposed on one of your plot points in your still life, with a plot point at the center of the clock face. Now imagine the hour hand pointing to the new plot point. To keep it simple, let's say our new plot point is close to about 7:30. With that in mind, turn your attention to your drawing and superimpose your imaginary clock on the same point in your drawing. Draw a line following the hand of the clock. The new plot point exists somewhere along this line. To determine its location, return to your still life and, using the clock analogy, visualize the clock on the other recognized plot point. In relationship to this other point, the new point seems to be located at about 9:30. Turn your attention back to your drawing and imagine your clock positioned so that the center of the clock is on the second plot point. Draw another line along the hand of the clock. Where these two lines intersect, place your new plot point. Now that I've defined my composition in terms of contours and defined the shapes, I'll finish my drawing by adding details and tone. In this video, I've shown you various measuring methods to help improve your drawing. You can use these various methods as little or as much as you want. You can even combine the various techniques. But remember, these measuring methods aren't the be-all and end-all. Drawing still relies on artistic sensibilities and skill. Furthermore, measuring works only as well as the amount of time you want to put into practicing these techniques and your patience. I hope you found this program helpful. I'm Larry Withers, and thanks for watching.